Hello and welcome to another edition of Truth is Making a Comeback, a production of LibertyNation.com. I'm Lisa K. Donner. On today's episode, 7 hours of Dems talking climate change. We've got the high and low lights for you with Washington political columnist Tim Donner. Gamblers and polls. Managing editor Mark Angelides has all the latest stats on the presidential horse race. Cherokee Nation faux member and presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren puts Trump on notice. She's no Hillary. Heartland correspondent Sarah Cowgill joins us with her usual wit and wisdom. And Trump versus Biden, who's really losing it? That's my parting shot today. All this and more on Liberty Nation TV. Stay tuned. One of the most popular articles on LibertyNation.com week in and week out is Tim Donner's culling of the wacky and damnable things said by politicians and the chattering class. Considering CNN hosted a 7-hour televised affair on climate change, the fields are fertile this week. What, pray tell, could be said in 7 hours by the Dems to make the cut? Well, a lot. I've asked our Washington political columnist to join us on today's show to highlight some of these. Hi, Tim. Are you still alive after sifting through 7 hours of this stuff?
Well, I don't know what you're talking about, Lisa. That's my idea of a fun evening, spending 420 consecutive minutes watching Democrats rail about climate change catastrophe. See, it's no longer global warming. It's no longer climate change. It's even now moved after CNN's town hall forum away from climate crisis to climate catastrophe, Lisa. And yet, it doesn't even finish climate change on the top 10 list of issues for Americans. And yet, Democrats are out to convince us that there's a mortal threat to the planet that must be addressed right now by essentially scrapping the entire economy and starting over.
All right, well, let's just jump right in. In the words of that brilliant political scientist, Jimmy Buffett, I guess there will be no more cheeseburgers in paradise.
Not this lifetime.
So with all the weighty matters in the world, Senator Kamala Harris seemed tremendously concerned about the planet-wide plastic straw crisis.
Yeah, well, Kamala has a way of projecting that she hasn't really thought through issues. And part of the reason she's stuck at single digits after taking on Joe Biden on the issue of race in the first debate is that there's so many answers like this one I'm about to play, so many times where they ask her a difficult issue and she says, well, I think we should have a conversation about that. This is the presidential primary. This is where you have the conversation. But let's listen to what she had to say on that one weighty issue.
Plastic straws are a big thing right now.
Yeah.
Do you ban plastic straws?
I think we should. Yes. I mean, look, I'm going to be honest. It's really difficult to drink out of a paper straw when if you don't gulp it down immediately, it starts to bend.
Yes.
And then, the little thing catches it. And then, so we got to kind of perfect that one a little bit more.
That woman is running for president of the United States, Lisa.
Yeah, and let me just say, she didn't seem real hep on banning plastic straws.
But she's like, yeah, I think we should. In other words, someone running for president doesn't want to just arbitrarily say on the spur of the moment, plastic straws. Let me think. Yeah, let's just get rid of them. Let's overturn entire industries. Because I kind of think it'd be a good idea because my left-wing base wants me to do it. That's what it came off as.
Moving right along, it was almost breathtaking to me that Joe Biden perceives millions of people foregoing their cars in favor of light rail.
Well, not many people picked up on this, Lisa, because they were focused on the blood that was increasingly concentrated in the former vice president's eye, his left eye, as his appearance on this endless town hall meeting on CNN progressed. And it took some of the, I don't know. I don't think light rail is something that anybody even thinks about. But for Joe Biden, it's the solution.
Should the U.S. ban fossil fuel exports, as some other candidates are calling for?
Well, I think we should, in fact, depending on what it is they're exporting for what they're replacing. Everything is incremental. Everything is incremental. For example, you talked earlier about transportation. I've been pushing really hard for mass transit and for rail. We can take millions of vehicles off the road if we had high-speed rail. I've been a champion of that for the last 25 years.
Now, Lisa, that was quintessential Joe Biden, because the first thing he did was he stumbled and bumbled. You didn't even know what he was saying. And then he is promoting an idea that's been thoroughly discredited, light rail, to the point where California, the leader in this, had to shut down their own light rail project, infrastructure project, because it would cost just way too much and wasn't feasible. And now Joe Biden wants to do it across the whole nation.
Is it really? It is really actually astonishing to me, and I wonder how this is going to go over in a city like Los Angeles, where people are notoriously addicted to driving the freeway in their cars.
Well, and light rail, basically, Lisa, benefits people who are well-heeled. Light rail is not something that the average man on the street is going to benefit from so much as the white progressive, rich white progressives who will use it on a regular basis.
All right, so looking at the big picture, Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, aka Spartacus, waxed on the enormity of the climate change catastrophe.
Well, the thing about Spartacus was, and this is actually from MSNBC, because not to be outdone by CNN's 420-minute unbroken chain of climate change alarmism, they wanted in on the action as well. So Chris Hayes brought on Spartacus, Senator Cory Booker, onto MSNBC, and he sounded the alarm bells.
It does feel like a matter of time. Just a question of when, of how many climate disasters we're going to see increasingly here on the mainland of the United States.
This is no longer up for debate in most Americans' hearts and minds, except for a narrow group of leadership that is doing the bidding of the fossil fuel industries and other massive corporate lobbyists who are trying to stop us doing action. And meanwhile, the consensus of global scientists are saying if we do not act with a sense of urgency in about an 11-year window, the catastrophic effects on humanity, we better plan for planetary crisis, migratory problems, extremism, famines, the kind of things that if we do not act, that we will see on the planet Earth.
Essentially, Lisa, the end of the world as we know it by 2030. And he and his fellow Democratic candidates are asking people to overturn the entire American system in order to account for this threat, which is entirely unproven and entirely theoretical. And by the way, in his bite, just to set it straight, there's no such thing as a global scientist, just as there is no such thing as climate science until Al Gore came along, and then suddenly there was a new burgeoning field called climate science, for which there's no certification.
Well, talk about a dystopian view of the world. I mean, this guy's talking about the apocalypse. But we must move on. I thought it was very odd, an odd moment when Senator Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont, commingled climate change with abortion.
I mean, it's breathtaking. And what it reveals, I think, Lisa, is that for Democrats, these issues are all interconnected as social justice issues. Climate is social justice. Abortion is social justice. Immigration is social justice. So they go far beyond just saying that let's just fix the climate. The Green New Deal is about a lot more than the climate. It's about social justice, environmental justice, abortion justice, and when it came to Bernie, when they went straight at him, and you've got to listen, by the way, this is as much about the questioner as it is about the answer from Bernie, where he's asked about climate change and answers about abortion. But listen to the question, because it's very revealing of the mindset of the far left.
Human population growth has more than doubled in the past 50 years. The planet cannot sustain this growth. I realize this is a poisonous topic for politicians, but it's crucial to face. Empowering women and educating everyone on the need to curb population growth seems a reasonable campaign to enact. Would you be courageous enough to discuss this issue and make it a key feature of a plan to address climate catastrophe?
Well, Martha, the answer is yes. And the answer has everything to do with the fact that women in the United States of America, by the way, have a right to control their own bodies and make reproductive decisions.
I mean, I don't know where the connection is, but here's where it might be. When they talk about population control, which is another thoroughly discredited idea, we talked about it a lot in the 1970s, that population control would solve world poverty. It hasn't worked. But what they're doing here, what Bernie's doing here, I think is saying that population control is important. And the way to do that is to have essentially abortion, unlimited abortion on demand. And there is where the connection can perhaps be made.
Well, you're right about that. Well, we've got to wrap this up, but we should end with some Cherokee wisdom from Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Well, no one quite goes on the warpath like Pocahontas when it comes to climate change and every other most radical socialist deconstructionist policy than Pocahontas. She gives voice to it better than anyone, I think, and she is rising in the polls steadily. And here's what she had to say at the endless CNN debate.
We better be willing to put the resources into it because the alternative is unthinkable. Life on Earth is at risk. And if we don't make this commitment, we not only cheat our children, we cheat their future and their children's future, and that is morally wrong.
So for Pocahontas, it's a moral imperative. Climate change, climate crisis, the coming climate catastrophe. It's all a matter of when, not if.
I actually talk about this later in the show with Sarah Cowgill, but she always sounds so angry to me, that is Elizabeth.
Well, she's what you call a scolding school marm. She's the kind of woman you had as a homeroom teacher in the 4th grade who stood there with a ruler ready to whack you on your hand if you did something wrong, and always hectoring and lecturing you. I'd like to see her smile a little more.
Yeah, the original hall monitor. Well, thank you, Tim. We've got to wrap this up, and I would like to urge our viewers to hit libertynation.com and read your fine article this week, The Psychotic Left and the Trump Emergency. Just really high quality political science and analysis. Thanks so much for joining us, Tim.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Lisa.
In the wake of several mass shootings during recent weeks and Democrat contenders making political capital out of them, in any normal election cycle, Donald Trump would be taking a beating, but not this time. Despite being pilloried by politicos and the media, President Trump has maintained his 47 to 50% approval rating without much fuss or drama. In fact, he's 3 points ahead of where Barack Obama was at the same time of his presidency. The Teflon Don, indeed. That is the prose of Liberty Nation's managing editor, Mark Angelides. Mark is here to discuss his widely popular article entitled A Democrat Contender Bloodbath. Welcome, sir, to Truth is Making a Comeback.
Thanks for having me on, Lisa.
Well, first of all, there's some interesting news about wall spending, and I'm wondering how that might affect the race.
Well, that's a good question. Obviously, it's the $3.6 billion that President Trump has now moved from other military building projects into building the wall. It's 175 meters of wall. Now, the big thing about this is not so much that he's getting the wall built, but that he's setting the agenda for what the Democrat candidates are now going to have to talk about. Because at the moment, they're either chiming themselves up to be the climate cohiso or the healthcare hero. But now they're going to have to address, do they want a wall? Do they want border security? And really, this is setting up Trump for any 2020 debates between himself and the Democrat nominee, because they're going to have to go on record for what they believe about the wall. And this is great ammunition for President Trump.
We also have some things happening on the GOP side of the race. Can you briefly outline those for us?
Yeah, so there's a couple of people that most people have probably never heard of. Bill Weld, who, you know, if you're around 20 years ago, maybe Bill Weld popped onto your radar, and Joe Walsh have put their hats in the ring for the Republican nomination. Realistically, they have no chance whatsoever. All the betting odds are pointing firmly against them. In fact, amongst Republican voters, President Trump is 95% sure to get, they see President Trump's 95% sure to get the nomination. And that's pretty good odds.
Speaking of DT, what's his approval rating this week and how's it looking?
Well, his approval ratings, oddly enough, they're exactly the same as they have been for the last 6 months to a year. He's floating around 46, 47. And I pointed this out in another TV we did a little while back. But he always seems to be about 2 to 3 points ahead of where Barack Obama was during his term in the same time in his presidency. So, and this was obviously coming up towards his second term, Barack Obama's second term. So, if we look at the approval ratings as an indication of perhaps will the president receive a second term, based on what we saw with Barack Obama, then absolutely Donald Trump is going to get the second term.
So are we also looking at congressional approval around that of the used car salesman?
Oh, I think that's cruel to the used car salesman, to be fair. The Congress is sitting about 18.4% when you do an aggregate of all the latest polls. That would be significantly lower, though, if there was one poll that came out that hit them with I think it was 24% approval, which is, for Congress, that's pretty high, but we can pretty much write that off as an outlier and say that their genuine approval is probably around 15.5%. So they're wildly unpopular. Perhaps the most unpopular in terms of polling for members of Congress is the Squad, who, despite getting many column inches, which you would presume puts them quite high up there in the popularity ratings, they're doing abysmal, really badly.
Well, speaking of the betting odds, let's go to the gamblers. It's always fun to check in with the people who are laying money down on the odds. What say them?
Well, this is the third week now that Elizabeth Warren has been topping the betting odds in the Democratic primary, which essentially is going to put the Biden campaign team into a major tailspin. The Biden team is always polling at the top in pretty much every race, just for polling. But in terms of betting, and these are people who have skin in the game, this is the third week that Elizabeth Warren has been topping this. And so, yeah, the race is tightening very, very much for the nomination.
And finally, some of the gambling statistics that you had this week. You had something about Trump and Scientology. I thought that was very funny.
Yes, there's some strange betting taking place in the US of A. At the moment, it's 25 to 1 that President Trump will become a Scientologist, which is kind of fun. And if you really fancy a long shot bet, you can bet $1 and get yourself 150 back if Trump becomes Muslim.
All right, well, thank you very much. Mark Angelides, managing editor of LibertyNation.com. Keep up the good work, Mr. Angelides, and thank you so much for joining us on Truth Is Making a Comeback. Presidential hopeful and faux Cherokee Senator Elizabeth Warren is laying down the law with President Donald Trump and chiding Hillary Clinton for being a sissy. During a recent campaign event in the safe space of Seattle, Warren bellowed, quote, "I know how to fight and I know how to win. Nobody's getting behind me on a debate stage and doing a handsy thing. That's not happening," unquote. Warren was, of course, speaking about the poor performance of Hillary Clinton during the second presidential debate in 2016. That's when candidate Trump followed Mrs. Clinton around the stage while making gestures of astonishment when she spoke. Why the Massachusetts senator chose to show her hand to the president and insult Hillary as if she were a wimp is a question currently raging across social media platforms and in newsrooms coast to coast. Joining me now with more on the story is national correspondent Sarah Cowgill.
Hey, Lisa, how are you today?
Good. How are things in the heartland?
The same as usual. Just hardworking, common sense folks doing their thing.
Well, what do you think the matron of Massachusetts was really trying to accomplish by sniping at Hillary Clinton?
Oh, I think she's trying to point out the fact that she's the better woman, that Hillary was kind of a wimp when it came to Trump on the debate stage, and that she's a tough, big, tough gal, and she can take old Donald Trump on anytime she wants.
Well, is she?
No. She yells a lot, though. I mean, you don't ever hear her just have a conversation or just a well-intoned speech. She yells at people. I mean, that's kind of a turnoff in and of itself. So I'm not sure that's going to play well if the audience has to, listen to the fingernails on the blackboard.
Well, it's funny because I noticed in the last debate that both Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont, seemed very angry.
I think they are angry, and I'm not entirely sure why, other than I don't see how either one of them have come this far. With the maiden of Massachusetts, I used to be a Cherokee, now I'm not. All that debacle and craziness and the baggage that she carries around, and Sanders, he's a socialist, and he's not going to gain any more ground than he did the last time around. Now, granted, the DNC kind of rigged the election in Hillary's favor, but Bernie still wasn't going to win. He still was not going to win in the great scheme of things. He is still a socialist that still is not playing well in the country.
Okay, well, you've been in and out of politics for most of your adult life. Do voters respond well to anger?
No, not really. I think they respond well to a good chess game. They respond well to somebody standing up for what they believe in. They don't particularly want the guy or the gal who is dragging down America or Americans, i.e. deplorables last year. They don't like that. It's not a fair, level playing field. They want to hear about issues. They want to hear a discussion, not a rant, not a scream. They want answers to questions. Instead, they, come up with how to spin the question and give the answer that they've practiced. America is not that stupid anymore.
Well, Elizabeth Warren has apparently calculated that putting the president on notice is a good idea. What do you think?
I think it's ridiculous. Number one, she's not the nominee as of yet, and so that's kind of showing her hand that she thinks she's just that good. And maybe she's just trying to say, hey, I'm so tough I can take him on and vote for me. I'm not sure where she was going with all of this silly stuff, but I think it's a poor move on her part. Strategists will figure out a way, to just hit her where it hurts, and it could be below the belt. And let's face it, in politics, all's fair. So I would expect, if she is the nominee, for Trump to come out with something that is just going to decimate her. I don't know what it is, but he'll come up with something.
Depending on who the Democrats select, will Trump, do you think, use the same intimidation tactics that he used last time?
No, because they're based on Hillary. That's how to get Hillary's goat. It's not going to be how to get Bernie or Biden or Warren's goat. It's a different goat. So let's face facts. He messed with her on stage, and she tried to turn it into some big victimology deal with her book, and she cried and whined, and it was just one of 1,000 excuses that she had. When it comes to men on stage, Trump's not going to stand behind Joe Biden and sniff his hair and intimidate him. That would be what Joe Biden does. Trump is going to come up with whatever it's going to take to, put them off balance a little bit. It's not going to be the same. Why would you pull that same trick out of your hat? That's 2016.
But the one thing that Trump does really well is hit back. You think she can dish it out and take it?
No, and I think what Trump does is he sets the stage. He's a chess player, you know, or let's put it this way. The NRA might like us a little bit more. He's a sniper, and he waits until the perfect time. He lets it fly. He nails his target, and they don't have anything to do but just collapse under the weight of the fact that he outmatched them one more time. He's really good at this. He's really good at looking down the line. He's good at baiting them. They respond, and they respond foolishly. He's a master of it. He's been doing this for 40 years in all of his business endeavors. In his TV show, The Apprentice, this is what he does. So good luck trying to outfox the fox.
Well, this is going to be a very, very interesting race. If it does turn out to be Warren versus Trump, that'll be even more fascinating. Thank you very much. Sarah Cowgill, national correspondent, LibertyNation.com. Do read Sarah's wonderful articles. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Lisa.
And now for this week's parting shot. On Inauguration Day 2021, Donald Trump will be 74 years old and Joe Biden 78. Age doesn't necessarily determine one's overall health, but questions involving both men's cognitive abilities have been swirling for some time, and they're likely to take center stage in the upcoming campaign.
I've been pushing really hard for mass transit.
And this week's Bloody Eye event with Joe Biden just highlights this and unsettles viewers. So a president's overall health is not a constitutional requirement, but Americans are right to be concerned about the physical and cognitive capabilities of their commander-in-chief. For both men, it is these cognitive capabilities that have come under scrutiny. So who really has the upper hand in terms of healthy gray matter? First, some history. For a century, historians have pondered who was really in charge of the country following Woodrow Wilson's severe stroke in October of 1919. As well, FDR's myriad health problems were kept very hush-hush throughout the 1940s. And there was Dwight D. Eisenhower, who suffered a heart attack during his first term as president in the fall of 1955. And a public campaign to portray John F. Kennedy as healthy as a horse ensued when there were questions about his physical fitness. Following his untimely death, it was revealed that Kennedy was racked with chronic pain resulting from injury and disease. Fast forward, and almost since the day he took the oath of office, Democrats have argued that Donald J. Trump is mentally unfit for office. These concerns about Trump have persisted and are often reported on. It now appears that a secret psychiatric panel is forming to judge the mental health of Trump, according to the Washington Examiner. Not to be outdone, those on the right consistently highlight a relentless list of gaffes made on the campaign trail by former Vice President Joe Biden. The question is whether these are simply silly slips of the lip or harbingers of a pernicious cognitive deficit, be it from age or his past medical history. The truth is that much of the media is engaged in more heat than light regarding both men's neuropsychiatric health. But there is one crucial difference. Joe Biden has suffered 2 brain aneurysms. Just this spring, Dr. Neil Castle, the neurosurgeon who operated on Mr. Biden, stated that the former VP is, quote, totally in the clear, unquote. In issuing a positive endorsement of Biden's brain health, Castle asserted that the Democratic frontrunner is better than he was before the surgery. But there's reason to believe this is more public spin. Based on medical studies and reports regarding the long-term effects of people who have suffered brain aneurysms, there's reason to regard this evaluation with some trepidation. Keeping in mind that Mr. Biden had not 1 but 2 of these medical events, it is within bounds to ask what the medical community says about the long-term effects of people who have undergone this type of surgery. In 2013, a study was conducted on 217 people who had survived ruptured aneurysms 10 years after their diagnosis and treatment. The analysis was conducted in Stockholm, Sweden. Researchers concluded that 70% of those who underwent cranial surgery, quote, had increased problems in 4 out of 5 dimensions of quality of life, and an increased rate of health problems, unquote. A medical abstract in a 1991 edition of the Journal of Neurology, Neurosurgery, and Psychiatry looked closely at the neurological damage following aneurysm surgery. Researchers conducted tests of intellect, memory, and conceptual learning of 3 subgroups of patients. The testing took place 12 to 84 months post-surgery and were compared with a control group of volunteers with no history of neurological or psychiatric disorder. Here is their conclusion, quote, "On average, the aneurysm patients showed a greater degree of intellectual and memory deterioration than the control group, and their performance was poor on the WCST, a measure of conceptual learning." The WCST is a neuropsychological exam that evaluates frontal lobe function of the brain. The study did find that 41% of patients showed no demonstrable evidence of impairment and could be designated as having made an excellent recovery. Even presuming Joe Biden was one of the 41% who made an excellent recovery, if Dr. Castle is to be believed, the odds are almost 60% that the former VP has deficits in the area of intellect or memory. So, can we chalk up Mr. Biden's inability to remember the URL of his website, recall the name of the president under which he served, or even identify the name of the state he is standing in, all as simple gaffes? Or could it be that we are seeing the long-term effects of a serious medical event in the life of Joe Biden? And that's my parting shot. And that's it for this edition of Truth is Making a Comeback. We invite you to check out our website, libertynation.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, download our app and podcast. And remember, liberty all the time and everywhere. Thanks so much for watching.
Truth is making a comeback. Visit us at libertynation.com.